Yeah, it's a good move, and again, it's a big name they've brought into the World Cup. K and Niger, one of the world's biggest logistics companies. That's a slightly better level of sponsor than Mushy Peas.
Yeah, well, it's a well organised event, and it's despite the absolute challenging circumstances that it's being organised within. So hopefully it goes ahead in its completion, and there's a fuck ton of tries scored and a load of trees planted. So that'll be a good news story about the legacy of our World Cup. Okay, thanks for everyone who got their news views in on the Google form this week. Look out for that over the next week. And a shout out, of course, as always, to the BBC Sport Rugby League page, totalrl.com and loverugbyleague.com for providing the stories for us to comment on. We're now going to move into some match reviews. Match reviews time then, and of course it's all about the Challenge Cup that we're going to focus on primarily. We're going to go through the Challenge Cup games in the order that they occurred. So we're on Saturday just gone, where it was the triple header over at the Leigh Sports Village. We're going to start with the women's final, which finished St Helens 34, York 6. It was 20-0 to Saints at half time, and they cemented their first Challenge Cup win. Marcus Griffiths was the referee, so a premier referee for the big match. We don't get stats from the Challenge Cup games, but we will run you through the scorers from the women's game. So for St Helens, the try scorers were Rachel Woozy with 2 tries, Danielle Bush, who grabbed the first try, Emily Rudge, who grabbed arguably the best try, Amy Hardcastle, Carrie Roberts, and Paige Travis. Beth Stott with 3 conversions. If she'd been able to kick some tough sideline conversions, it would have been a much bigger scoreline. For York, Sinead Peach grabbed their only try, and Rhiannon Marshall converted it. Loads of people wanted to get in touch to talk about this game, which was live on the BBC for us all to see.
Yep, so starting off with Fatboy_Rob, who said deserved win for Saints against the Mercenaries from North Yorkshire. Rudge was the standout player, and both Saints' edges killed York again and again. It was a typical Lindsay Anfield performance with square pegs in round holes. Marshall was blowing out of arse in the halves after 10 minutes. I don't think it took her that long. Maybe Anfield should retire again to concentrate on her teaching. #bottlejob, #rat.
Pop the Viking said, great to see Women's RL on the BBC. A tough start to the game for both teams, with York having more field position. Then Saints took a hold of the game and were convincing leaders at half time. York came out fighting in the second half, but were just not good enough against a spirited Saints team. A good game to showcase the women's game.
Mark Butler said enjoyable final to start the day. York can probably feel a bit aggrieved at the score. Doesn't reflect what they put into the game, and they certainly had opportunities that tested their opponent's line. But St Helens were much more clinical after a tight opening. As they opened a lead, they pulled out some moves straight from the classic Saints playbook.
St David said, York on top early, but Cunningham took charge, and that was that. Great performance from the Saints. Silverware.
David Hunter said Saints were just too strong, but I think that York were really let down by the playmakers and their inability to repeat sets on the Saints line. They really just looked lost on the final plays. All the pressure gets released, and Saints are just too good if you give them a chance.
Yeah, and Frogmore sent in a doubler here. He said, looked like it'd be a tough game judging by the intensity that York started with. Saints weathered the pressure and put on their own. After Saints' first try, I thought, oh no, this could be a long day after Gaskin went down from buckling her knee during the celebrations. The experience shone through for the Saints as they started to pull away before the break, then keeping the foot down until the full-time hooter. Not sure if the stats back up my observations, but Jones had a defensive effort that would make her male counterpart proud. Rudge, much deserved player of the match, but thought Hardcastle had to have been close to getting the award as she played out of her skin. Happy for the ladies. Coys.
Joshua's granddad said only one team in it, but disappointing at RFL lack of respect to the York players who had to watch Saints get cup and winners medals for it to be announced runners-up medals awarding in the changing room afterwards.
Yeah, I noticed that the runners-up medals were just sat in a tray, but they weren't getting them. But I don't know if it's like COVID rules related or
next to the Papa John's pizza.
Yeah.
Well, it might be a good thing if they were sat out of the way, so they weren't too close to the Saints players to catch anything.
Yeah, good point. Dr. Hideous said, in the opening 10 error-strewn minutes, Saints couldn't complete a set, and so York had most of the ball and all of the territory, but they just couldn't convert that into points. The moment that Saints stopped dropping the ball, I knew the game was theirs.
And finally, at Mike Webb 58 says, great start to 7 hours of top-class rugby. York were tenacious, but Saints were excellent after a shaky start. Thrilling tries and support play. Very impressed with the commentary from Sharon Shortle. Oh no, I get used to saying that name. It's too many SHs. Informative without being patronising.
Well, she knows the York side well, doesn't she? So, well, she knew the York side well before they brought in a load of mercenaries. I enjoyed this match, but I do think York will be kicking themselves for how they didn't take advantage in the first 5 or so minutes of the game. I know you were otherwise occupied, so I don't know how much of this you caught.
I watched the whole thing in the evening when I got home.
Good stuff.
I actually watched this one from beginning to end, including the build-up, which I said the BBC did a brilliant job of.
Although, if I was Danica and Dobson, I forget her first name, Angie,
yeah.
Andrea, sorry. If I were them, I'd be like, why the fuck didn't we get chairs? And Jamie Jones and John Wilkin got chairs. What's that about?
Well, I could say something unpleasant about John Wilkin, but we'll leave that to. We probably will come on to that when we're talking about the Hull FC game.
But no, I do think York will be kicking themselves because they didn't. What York seemed to lack, not matching their intensity at gaining field position and putting Saints under some pressure for some of the errors that Saints made early on, was a cohesion in attack, and maybe it was just one or two too many changes in the end for them or something. I'm not sure.
I think it was a platform they just didn't have a platform from the forwards. I think because they put Rhiannon Marshall into the halves, they just missed out on her punch at the front. It meant that Grace Field was having to do a bit too much work in terms of being the sort of sole.
She was good though.
She was good, and she should. Yeah,
she shone as an international player in that York side.
Yeah, and she should. Yeah, she should be in the end of year conversation, definitely.
I mean, the battle between Field and Crowell was one of the premier matchups of the whole day, I thought.
Yeah, basically battling out for contention for that.
I can't see how you don't start both of them in the front row now for England after that performance where they went toe to toe and absolutely hammered each other.
I think they're definitely both in form. I mean, I was surprised when they moved Chantal Crowell into the front row at the beginning of the season, but you watch that game and it makes complete sense.
Yeah,
she looked like she played there for years.
Well, as the women's game gets more athletic, you will see players more like her playing in the front row.
Yeah, that's true. You'll lose that element of the sort of more traditional prop, shall we say? Yeah, you'll lose that. And I think this is sort of slightly the point that I felt sorry for Rhiannon Marshall, because I felt that if she had the opportunity to be professional, she would just benefit from that immensely. If she was able to train full time, particularly, I feel she's someone who would really, her game would just go to a next level as a result.
She gets it, doesn't she? She's got the skill set. She's
got the skills. It's you just see sometimes what she lacks is a fitness in long, because she's being asked to do ridiculous length of things. But if she was able to just focus on that and train full time, then she would become a better player and she would be able to fulfill what is her potential. And I think that's something that longer term we're going to have to look at, because you look at Australia and New Zealand where they are 90% full time or there or thereabouts in terms of who's coming over from their squad. And I think it does worry me at the end of the year. I think the concentration of talent is going to be another thing that's going to cause problems. I mean, you look at that Saints side, and because of the structural thing, there's not much to add to it in terms of performance that takes it from there to being an England squad.
No, I think
there's bits, there's upgrades here and there, but there's not.
There's probably
not
2 or
else.
3 better fullbacks around the league and that's not slighting Rebecca Rotherham. It's just saying that, Greenfield and Stanley and Beavers are better. Yeah.
And that's the problem that England have got, is they've got concentration in certain positions where, centre is probably another one where there's a wealth of potential riches. And it's and I think the second row is the other place. I tell you who impressed me from a Saints perspective, as well as the sort of obvious big names, was the second Rudge, Isabel Rudge, coming off the bench. She actually had quite an impact. Apart from getting smacked in the nose quite early on, you could see she was she wasn't doing anything flash, but what she was doing as a forward was just punching holes, and it was taking 4 York players to bring her down. And that was really tiring them out, and that was when they started to get on top. Was when they had that, they had that battering ram, and they got that platform. Which then with Saints, they've got people that can exploit that ruthlessly.
Yeah, well, I think the bench for Saints was far more solid. The bench for York, who were fantastic when they beat Wigan 2 rounds ago, and didn't need to be fantastic against Cass because of the way the game started, but they made a lot of mistakes with the ball, whereas Saints kind of got all of their mistakes out in the first 10 minutes, and then other than a bit of skill lacking taking the high ball, which was across the board, if we're honest, an area to work on for the girls for the World Cup, but that was pretty much error-free after that start. But whereas the errors for York crept in as they tired, which is what you're more likely to expect. I do think, though, when they did have good field position, the link between Marshall and the new fullback Hardy wasn't quite there. Hardy seemed to be really deep all the time when she was coming into the line, and almost finding herself behind the centre and the winger, so they couldn't actually put a play on. Whereas when Saints had the ball in attacking positions, and you saw it the very first time they survived a set to get to an attacking position, they all ran the right lines and the playmaker made the right pass and a try was scored.
Yeah, that's a very Sevens type play, isn't it? Standing that bit deeper and expecting the ball to be thrown out and having that extra bit of space.
Was just not the same. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so I think they did suffer from that, and they did look better in that second half when they put Kelsey Gentles into fullback, and that did seem to work for them, and she was able to give them a bit more join up and a bit more go forward.
Well, they'd also shoved Tamsin Renouf out into the centres when she's done some of her better work in the second row traditionally, and so again they lost something there in their attacking shape.
Yeah,
and that was obviously as an idea of Renouf might be able to combat the unbelievable power and pace of Amy Hardcastle, but to be honest, none of them could.
No one's going to stop Amy Hardcastle. I mean, yeah, she is a fantastic athlete and a fantastic ambassador for the game, as we've said a few times. And she was out coaching her daughter's under-9 team on a Sunday morning. When most
before doing the shift at the hospital, I'm sure.
When most normal humans probably couldn't walk, she was out doing that. And the two did impress me for York was Sinead Peach. Like, you could see her, the way she was going through her processes, and particularly the way she was scanning from dummy half. She was looking for those holes. She was trying to doing everything she could. It's probably the best game I think I've seen her actually play individually, and because she was just able, and unfortunately she just didn't have anyone that was able to keep with her.
No, but she's a tough player who I think has got that tenacity and can go with the distance and in a match.
She'd be very good to come off the bench to spell your starting hooker.
Yeah.
Especially if you
behind and you need
up
just a bit of grit just to turn a momentum turning moment. She seems like
and
the player who can get that.
Even just to hang on in there for